Good evening, everyone, and welcome, Ambassador. My name's Olga Stanoilovich. I'm chair of the Serbian Council of Great Britain, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this event, which I'll be co-hosting with Maya Jordan. The meeting, as Maya said, is one of 40 events that we're organising for Serbian Month, and we hope that you'll be able to join other events, and you can find details of these in the Serbian Council and Roundtable websites. It's a great privilege for us to be hosting this meeting with Mr. Edward Ferguson, the British Ambassador to Serbia, whom I first met during a visit to Serbia in last September with a group of Scottish and English women on a tour to honour the memory of the founder of the Scottish Women's Hospital, Dr. Elsie Ingalls, and the women who served with her in Serbia during the First World War. The ambassador was kind enough to host a reception for us, and inspired, I think, by the example of Dr. Ingalls, we agreed to organise a meeting during Serbian Month to see how relations between our two countries could be strengthened. We're grateful that he has given up his time and in his busy schedule to take questions which are of interest to the Serbian diaspora in Britain. And we, in turn, will discuss the ideas raised at this meeting at the round table that we hold on the 3rd of March. And we will look at ways in which we can use the ideas that have come out of here as a more positive dialogue between our two countries, and to see how the Serbian diaspora in Britain can contribute to this. So welcome everyone, and especially Ambassador. If I can just explain the format of the meeting, because it's not always easy in these Zoom meetings. It will last for an hour. There are questions that Maya and I will ask the ambassador, and we will try and incorporate any questions that you want raised, and build those into the actual programme. If you want a question raised, can you please use the chat facility and state your name and organisation? And can you be brief so that we can fit in as many questions as possible? The meeting's being recorded, so if you don't want to feature, switch off your camera. Participants will be muted during the meeting, as is normal in these type of meetings. And Ivan Militic, our technical wizard, will be managing the technical aspects of the meeting. So I think, unless there's any questions, we're ready to begin. So, Ambassador, anyone reading your biography will see that you've had a very illustrious and varied career, both in the Ministry of Defence and in the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, dealing with most challenging military, diplomatic and political issues that we face in some of the world's hotspots, such as Iraq and Afghanistan. Your career has also included a posting to Washington, but what's probably of most interest to this audience is that this is your second posting to the Western Balkans, the first being to Bosnia and Herzegovina, where you were ambassador from 2014 to 2018. We're interested to know, what are your perceptions of the Western Balkans, and have there been any issues in making the transition from one country to the other?
Well, Olga, first off, thank you very, very much for that introduction and for the invitation. And can I just start off by saying a big thank you and congratulations to everyone involved in Serbian Month. I think it's a really great initiative. It's brilliant to see it growing every year in scope and ambition. I think last year I was not officially announced as the next ambassador to Belgrade, but I was sort of secretly hopping on various calls to try and learn from lots of interesting people in keeping a low profile. So I certainly found it really useful as a way of getting myself up to speed before I arrived. I mean, to answer your question, as you say, I spent 4 years in Bosnia and Herzegovina from 2014 to 2018. I mean, I think probably the most fascinating and frustrating professional 4 years of my life. It is a wonderful but tortured country in many ways, and it is really hard to get things done there. And I think as a diplomat, there is real agency. I think British diplomat, you can do things there that really matter, but you have to invest your whole self to do it. And it can be quite exhausting. So after 4 years there, I needed to get away from the Western Balkans for a little while. I was pretty much burned out. And went to the much less fractious and polarized Washington, D.C. For 4 years before realizing actually I'd got the bug and really wanted to come back to the region, which I'd sort of fallen in love with, really. And my family, the same. Actually, our youngest daughter was born in Sarajevo. We've made lots of friends throughout the region, and we love it here. We love the people, and we think there's just so much potential. And so I was really excited that I was given this opportunity to come back again, this time to Serbia, and to try again to make any contribution I can to furthering our relationship and to helping this country and this region to fulfill that potential. I mean, you asked if there are any issues. I think there is inevitably. I think the challenge is that sometimes it feels quite familiar to experiences I've had or things I've learned in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But the danger is of just assuming that the template of something that might work in one country will work in the other. And I think, for any new ambassador, the key thing in the first months, and I'm still in my first months, I've been here about 5 or 6 months now, is to listen and to learn, and not to leap to conclusions and not to think you know everything before you definitely do not. And so I'm definitely still in that listening and learning stage, trying not to make too many mistakes. But equally, I'm coming up with some pretty clear ideas, I think, about where I see a real potential to grow our relationship with Serbia. So I'm pretty excited, actually. I think there's a lot that can be done.
Okay, I mean, that follows on very nicely to the next question that I had for you. You've been in Serbia, as you said, since July 2023, and you're obviously listening, learning. We wonder, what were your first impressions of the country, and what opportunities do you see for it?
So I think my first impressions were how familiar but different it felt. It really felt to us as a family who had loved being in Sarajevo, that we'd come home to a region, the region that felt really familiar and homely. We felt at home straight away. But Belgrade is a very different city than Sarajevo, and it felt that although it was familiar, it was definitely on a completely different scale and completely different atmosphere and a place to live, really, with so much more going on. As a really vibrant, scene across all kind of facets, and so that's been great fun. It's a great city to live in. And then professionally, I think that my first impressions were, to be honest, I think when one sits in Washington D.C., as I did initially when I was offered this job for some months while finishing my previous role, and then in the UK for another year or so, while I was learning Serbian, amongst other things, I think one tends to hear the bad news. I think the reporting that makes its way, even to those who are really trying to get a rounded picture, it can be pretty bleak at times. And one of the first things that I really learned on arrival is just how much opportunity there is here and how many positive things are going on, which was something that I was sort of struggling to get get my arms around from a distance. And so I think I spent plenty of time thinking around some of the more challenging issues, that inevitably I have had to deal with, and I'm sure we'll come on to talk about some of those. But actually, the real opportunities to grow our relationship in the economy, in security cooperation, in our soft power and cultural relationships, that was really what I found most exciting on arrival, and I still do. I think there's as I say, masses to be done, and we've got a reasonable foundation, but I think there's a lot more to do.
Ambassador, you say that there was bad sort of that was in operation before you came to Serbia, and it was difficult to see through that. Do you have any ideas why that might be? Why?
I think the Western Balkans. Well, let's put it. I mean, the world is a pretty challenging place right now, and there are lots of things going on that are attracting the attention, particularly of policymakers and diplomats like me. Ukraine, first and foremost, of those. I think it was striking to me, having even though I'd been ambassador to Bosnia and Herzegovina for 4 years, I spent 4 years in Washington, and the Western Balkans barely came up, to be honest. I mean, people were thinking about the rise of China. They were thinking about the Russian threat to European security. They were thinking about the Middle East. There wasn't a lot of bandwidth left for this, small but important part of Europe. And so I think the people who are most focused on the region, sometimes most focused on its problems and challenges and trying to get people to pay attention. I think there is not enough, and I think this is particularly true of the UK. And I can see some friends from the Chamber of Commerce on the line. I think we are seeing real growth in our commercial and trading relationship, but there aren't enough businesses engaged. I think people aren't aware of the opportunities. People aren't reporting on the opportunities. We tend to, when we hear about Serbia, we tend to hear it linked to Kosovo first and foremost, or perhaps Russia second. What we don't hear is all that's going on economically or culturally as well. So I think it's not the most balanced picture from afar, but there are reasons to be positive, and I'm keen to make the most of them.
Well, that was, my next question for you was, what are your priorities? And I think you've highlighted a couple of them, but maybe we could talk about those in more detail, about the relationship that you see between the UK and Serbia.
Well, I think I've talked about wanting to build a really modern, positive and forward-looking relationship with Serbia. I think all too often we tend to look at each other through the lens of the 1990s, and we need to look forward at least as much as we look back. And so, what do I mean by modern, positive, forward-looking? I think there are 3 particular areas that I'm going to be focusing on. The first is building up our trade and commercial relationship, and really, if you like, that kind of transactional foundation to the relationship. Our trade is significant and growing. I hope this year will blast through the £1 billion a year trade exchange barrier and go supersonic thereafter. I think what's particularly good is that a lot of the growth is in really kind of cutting edge sectors of the economy. I was just with the governor of the central bank today, and we were going through some of the data that lies behind the fact that we're third now for trade in services with Serbia, and third place after the US and Germany. And a lot of that is about growth in digital sector and ICT sector, and that kind of exchange is really exciting to see. And Serbia, is embracing the next generation economy in biotech and AI, and so I think we will see that exchange kind of naturally and organically grow. It doesn't really need very much from me as a diplomat and ambassador, but where I can, I'll obviously be trying to kind of encourage that and break down any barriers to that growth. But really growing that kind of broad commercial and trade exchange for me is foundational to the relationship. And I've got some really good tools to do that. First and foremost, my brilliant people at the embassy, and there's a lot of experience. Secondly, some fantastic partners, including the Chamber of Commerce, who are on the line. But thirdly, some really useful government tools. And I'll mention one, which is called UK Export Finance, because it's not well enough known, but it's really significant. It essentially allows the UK to offer sovereign-backed guarantees to Serbia that allows Serbia to borrow money at the UK's credit rating rather than Serbia, so cheaper money that allows it to raise its ambition for investment. And so, we can offer up to £4.5 billion worth of UK export finance to Serbia. That is a significant chunk of money. The president's government program for the next 4 years, he costed about 16 to 17 million euros. So it's a significant slug of money that we could potentially make available. I'm working very hard to build a really solid pipeline, and I think we will be involved in some big infrastructure and renewable energy projects in particular over the coming years, which I'm really excited about, not least because one of the conditions for access to this money is that at least 20% of the content has to come from the UK. And so for me, it's a really exciting tool that allows us to get in on some really important things that will shape Serbia's economy and its future, but can also be a vehicle to bring new British companies into the Serbian market who might not have been involved before. And I think that's really exciting. So again, that kind of trade and commercial relationship, I think, is kind of foundational, building that transactional partnership that I think can just be a really useful and important kind of ballast and bulwark against political changes in the weather. And then if that's the transactional part, then the second part for me is about building trust. And for me, that's largely done, or importantly done, through security partnerships, where we're prepared to expose some of our vulnerabilities, some of our more sensitive information to each other, and work as partners to address kind of mutual challenges. So as one example, this morning I was with the Ministry of Defence, talking to them about our defence partnership. I was also with the Supreme Prosecutor later on in the morning, talking about our law enforcement cooperation, where we've been doing some really fantastic things. Just before Christmas, some of you might have spotted a joint operation between the Met Police and the Serbian authorities, arresting for money laundering some people who are suspected of involvement in one of Britain's largest robberies, which included Frank Lampard and Mark Exton, amongst others. So really fantastic partnership. We've been working on illegal migration, on drugs, on murder trials and other things. And that's a real positive in the relationship. It benefits all of us. We all have shared security interests. And so I think it's really key. Defence partnerships, again, we have British and Serbian service personnel serving together on operations in Cyprus, wearing UN blue berets. We're growing our partnership in military medicine, in defence education, in defence intelligence, amongst other areas. And I think there's, again, and for me, as someone who spent nearly 20 years in the Ministry of Defence, I see lots of scope to build that partnership. If you can think where we were in the two world wars, where we were allies, we are a long way from that these days in terms of the scale and scope and ambition. So I'm really keen to do what I can with my expertise in that space to build back some of that partnership. And then I think the third area, you could call it many things. You could call it soft power or other things. I mean, I would say really just trying to improve Britain's reputation in Serbia and Serbia's reputation in the UK. Because I think that our reputation in both directions is a barrier to some of the things we want to achieve. As I say, too often we see each other through the lens of the past. And I think we need to modernize and revitalize some of the historic links. And you talked about Elsie Inglis and some of those, really, I think, fantastic stories that have linked us through history. Connect them to some of the more, current and forward-looking things, including our extraordinary cultural connections across film and TV and music. We've got Ed Sheeran coming here in August, which I'm very excited about. I've got tickets, amongst others. But putting a UK flag around some of these things that people take for granted, like the Premier League, and making sure that people are connecting them with the UK. And then really looking at how we build some people and people-to-people connections, which is not just about governments talking to each other. That's really important. But it's also about parliamentarians talking to each other. If you look at the way that Serbia talks about in our parliament, or that UK has talked about in the Narodna Skupština here, there is definitely room for improvement in mutual understanding on both directions. Religious leaders, military leaders, cultural, NGO, there's a lot to be done in that space. We've got some fantastic tools, again, like Chevening, where we get some really superb people who will be integral to Serbia's future. we invest in them in the UK. We need to make sure that we're using those networks that we've built. I'd like to expand them. I used to have, when I was in Bosnia, I used to have a fellowship where we went talent spotting for future leaders across all sectors and invested in them and created these fantastic partnerships and relationships. I'd love to do more of that here. Budget's permitting, but I'm on the case. And I think, yes, I think someone said in the chat, what about the diaspora? And yeah, you know, I mean, I think, again, fantastic resource, you know, of people with connections to Serbia in the UK, doing fantastic things in the British economy, often with really interesting connections back to Serbia. I think we need to do better at tapping into some of those things and making sure really that we're just making the best possible use of all the tools, all the connections that we have. The British Council is, I think, a really critical part of this story as well. And I know that Claire Sears, the regional director here, has got an increase to her budget for the coming years, which I'm very excited about and looking to put to good use. So I think those three areas for me are kind of top priorities. So commercial and transactional, security partnerships and trust building, and then kind of building our reputation, you know, building and improving our reputation in both directions in a way that I hope will just help perceptions and smooth both the other kind of priorities as well.
I mean, it's very reassuring and welcome to hear, you know, what you've said, because I think we in the sort of Serbian diaspora in Britain, you know, have found the past since the 1990s a difficult time. You know, especially when we look back on those times when we were allies and we were very close. I mean, that's why, you know, the story of Dr. Ingalls and what the women in the Scottish Women's Hospital did is such an important one, because it shows the ties that we had at that time. Now, some of the things are way beyond what that you've been discussing are beyond what the Serbian diaspora can bring to the table. But I'm glad you said that, you know, through cultural exchange, through people to people, and through leadership and through those connections, that we can have something that we can contribute. I don't know now, if that seems to me, rather than focusing on the past and what are I mean, maybe we should just touch on that. What do you see are the real barriers in the work that you're doing? I suppose it's the crunch issues between our two countries.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think, you know, I want to build, as I say, a modern, positive, forward-looking partnership. But you know, there are issues where we don't always see things the same way. And so, you know, I do spend more of my time than I would like dealing with some of those. I think right now, of course, you know, a lot of my meetings are focusing on Kosovo, and in particular, the regulation of the Central Bank of Kosovo that has the effect essentially of banning the use of the Serbian dinar in Kosovo, which is a source of serious concern. I saw the president on this last week, and Serbia has just called for a special session of the UN Security Council. You know, and I think we are concerned about what is going on, and the fact that this essentially came out of nowhere with no, you know, as far as we can see, no real plan for how to ensure that people in Kosovo are continuing to get their pay and their pensions and so on. So we're working on that as a real priority. So I think, you know, those kind of regional connections, many of which are rooted in frankly, the failure to get over some of those, you know, open wounds from the past, and to find political solutions and move forward, are inevitably a distraction from other things and hold the region back. You know, I think investors, you know, if you go to some of the priorities I mentioned, if I'm looking at British companies, the first question they will always ask is about stability, right? I mean, any investor wants stability. So the message that is being sent is not always a helpful one. And otherwise, you know, I think there is always room for improvement. And I think, you know, inevitably as the UK, we think we've got something to offer in terms of helping Serbia to build stronger democracy, better institutions, better functioning institutions, in terms of you know, improving access to independent, high quality journalism that gives people a real understanding of what's going on. You know, one of my early impressions would be that the quality of journalism and media here is pretty toxic in most directions, on all sides of the political divide. We really saw that through the local election. So it is not always the healthiest kind of social context in which to be trying to talk about positive things when polarization is a big part of the problem. So again, I think there's lots that we can and will try to do on those kind of issues. I mean, just on some of those social issues, one of our big priorities of the UK government is working on trying to empower and bring forward and unlock the potential of women and girls, essentially, to play more of a leadership role in their societies, both now and in the future. And I do think there is this sort of kind of toxic, kind of macho kind of culture that occasionally it feels is a barrier to doing things in which it essentially provides a breeding ground for some of the sort of political polarization and ethnic nationalism and other challenges we see. So I really think that's an area I've been talking, for example, to the Equalities Commissioner here about how we can work together to try and find, more positive role models, really, for the next generation of any gender, but certainly more women as well.
That's really fascinating. I'm going to now hand over to Maya, who's going to sort of talk about areas where I think we can, as the Serbian diaspora in the UK, can have a role to play, or think we can. So Maya, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I think that Mr. Ferguson answered quite a lot of questions that they have been asked there. I will just go a little bit back to economy, because we have a question from Jadranka. Total trade in goods and services, exports plus imports, between the UK and Serbia was 1 billion in the 4 quarters to the end of the 2023. Which sector in either direction does Your Excellency see as offering the best potential for future growth? We have been talking about that, but if you want to add maybe a little bit more about that, or...
Yeah, I mean, I think sectors plural. As I say, I think we are planning to get behind some really big, crunchy projects on particularly road infrastructure, highway building, and also renewable energy, amongst others. And as I say, I hope that will be a real magnet to attract new British companies to enter the Serbian market. We're very interested in some of the more modern fourth generation economy. So AI, digital, biotech, and as I say, I think that's probably the fastest growing aspect of our commercial relationship today. That's certainly what the data from the central bank today was showing me. But I think there are other areas too. Next week, is it next week? I think, or the week after, I shall be in Novi Sad with the Chamber of Commerce for Vojvodina as part of a launch of essentially a guide that the Chamber of Commerce has worked on, which is helping Serbian exporters to export food and drink into the UK. And I think that kind of agri. So I was talking to Invest Northern Ireland this week about opportunities to find more British investors in this direction as well, in agri and food kind of space. So I think again a broad sweep of potential sectors, but I'm always open to other areas or other recommendations for areas where we can lean in and invest, and certainly invest our time and energy and help support potential investments in either direction.
Thank you very much. I hope that explained, Jadranka, your question. And I will now go back to the other level of our communication and collaboration between two countries. Obviously, there are political issues, but us being Serbian diaspora here and working very hard to get the picture of Serbia being changed through all these events and lots of effort to show Serbia as a different country, not as one that you said is viewed mostly. First question, when you heard first time about Serbian Mind, is it just this year and then we approached you, or maybe you heard before?
No, I heard about it last year, and I remember in particular a session that I joined by Nick Ilic, who was the former defense attaché in Belgrade, talking about our collaboration and cooperation through the Second World War. And I delved into a couple of other sessions as well. But yeah, no, so I think it's something that I'm just looked at the programme for this month, and I'm hoping to dial into other things and listen to people who are not me, who will tell me things I don't know.
Okay, no pleasure at all. We just wanted to ask because our main issue is how to send the message about it and how to approach people. So that is very useful to know how we could promote our festival in general and what is the way to do it. Because we are doing that for 16 years now, and I must say since COVID and 2021. Things have changed because we get this opportunity for Zoom and we start to do this big catalog. Maybe you have time to read it, probably not yet, but we will suggest if you have time to have a look. There are 4 catalogs up to now. So in that way, we Serbs in UK try to promote our diaspora here. Now, there are some barriers here because we are very popular and known amongst Serbian community, but not as much amongst British community because we do have some British theaters and musicians and artists which have been joining, and that's kind of easier part. But what are your suggestions? How else we can promote our festival apart of what is done at the moment?
So I think one suggestion would be, as I say, from where I sit, we're trying to do the same things, which is to promote a more positive perception of Serbia and of the UK in the other direction. So I see ourselves as natural allies. So if there are things that my embassy can do to promote events, and clearly we have a lot of people following us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and so on, then we're very happy to do that. I think finding the opportunities where they exist, and I think there are some real areas of opportunity in the future. The Serbian government has been investing in, I hope I get the title right, but the Serbian Cultural Centre, essentially, in London, which I hope will open later this year. I think Serbia will have a new ambassador soon. And so I think there's a kind of conference opportunity there, particularly perhaps tied to the additional funding that we expect for the British Council, to have some fantastic kind of exhibitions, both of UK, cultural richness in Serbia, but also in the other direction as well. And hopefully that might be a really good way of finding a broader audience. I think one of the things I'm really keen to do as well is think about history and how we can tell some of the stories. That whenever I talk to people about Elsie Inglis and the Scottish Women's Hospitals, or Flora Sands as the first woman officer in the Serbian Armed Forces, or Rear Admiral Ernest Trowbridge, or whoever it might be, everyone says, "Wow, what a fantastic story! You should tell that story." And I think, "Oh my God, we've been trying to tell that story for years. How do we get people to listen?" I do think that there are some interesting examples out there. The US have been working very hard on promoting the story of Operation Halyard, and have got a lot of attention for that in recent months and years. But I think we've got a real richness of stories, and we have to find ways of telling them. I hope that Elsie Inglis will soon become the first woman to have a bronze statue on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. What a great hook for telling that story. I would love to see even more recognition of that story across Serbia. So I'm in the market for ideas. As I say, I'm new, I'm ambitious, but I need all the kind of brilliant insights and advice I can get. So if anyone on this call has any amazing pearls of wisdom, please don't hesitate to send them my way.
Yeah, that is exactly what we wanted to say. Serbian diaspora is very strong here. It became stronger in, let's say, last 10 years maybe, or from 2000 to 20 years, because new organizations being established and we all got together. So we had this, not just this stage of Serbian Mind, but we have a round table initiative, which is gathering most of our organizations working together, and we are together emphasizing certain issues which are concerning our diaspora here. So in that way, thank you very much for offering some kind of help. So we now feel free to approach you as a round table.
Please do.
Maya, can I just sort of say, Ambassador, we're celebrating this year the 10th anniversary of having a memorial service for women in the foreign medical missions who went to Serbia in the First World War. And the speaker doing a retrospective this year, and one of the speakers will be Louise Miller, who's going to be talking about Florissants and the George Herioters. So again, that's a story that I think Gordana and I were on the trip that went to Serbia, and I think the women, the Scottish women and the English women, were really touched by the way in which their contribution was recognised and honoured in Serbia, and yet is forgotten here. And I think what we've been trying to do is see how our work on areas of history where we were very close together can strengthen the relationship between our two countries.
Here. Yeah, I totally agree. And, I mean, you mentioned Florissants. I mean, there's a film that's waiting to be written. So everyone knows a good screenwriter. Send in my direction. But, I think, there are some really, really fantastic stories, particularly actually about amazing women who've played a role in Serbia's history, from Lady Paget to Elsie Inglis to Florissants and others. And so, I think there are some great stories, and just finding the right ways to tell them in a way that, kind of reaches more people in the UK and in Serbia is one of the challenges that I'm really trying to embrace.
And it might help you with your work on trying to address the macho culture in Serbia and have women role models and girl role models.
Absolutely, and I mean, isn't it fascinating? These extraordinary women, had to leave Britain and go to Serbia to achieve their potential. It was a shame for Britain, but. And it's I was speaking at an exhibition at the University Library on women's empowerment a few weeks ago, and making that point. I mean, 100 years ago, women had to leave their home in the UK to go to Serbia to find to be empowered. If Serbia had allowed its own women to achieve their potential, who knows what might have happened at that point. And so, the more we can unlock that, the better.
Can I ask one question about British diaspora in Serbia? How big it is? Do you know how big it is, and how you connect them?
Well, there's a really good question. So, I mean, I keep discovering new people. So I haven't plumbed the depths of that at all. I mean, it is a sort of a perennial challenge. I think it is a really there's a potential in that community that I'm keen to exploit. At the same time, I'm a little limited by government rules, who are very clear that we're not here to speak to Brits, but to Serbians, and certainly not spend money on them. So I'm a bit constrained, but certainly in terms of I'm seeing member of the Serbian British Britain Serbia here on tomorrow, Friday, to talk about precisely how can we make better use and better inroads into building that partnership.
Because you have one advantage, you have British Council, which is actually financed by your government. So obviously there are more funds. And we as the Serbian Council, we are volunteering here. So that's a big difference in the funding. But we have will and need to present our country. So we are driven by different forces, maybe, but works both ways. Will be great if we get funding as well, but there we are, doesn't matter. The result is already here anyway. Great. So I have a question connected with that, which basically we did cover, but Lenka asks, she's from Serbian Student Association Abroad, UK branch. The question for the ambassador, how do you see the future relations between Serbian students in the UK and Serbian diaspora with the UK embassy? So obviously talking about UK embassy in London.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for the Serbian embassy in London, that's not a question I can answer. Although, I think when the new ambassador is announced, I think it will be a really good partnership, and I'm looking forward to working with them. And so I think, I hope that they will share my ambition. But I'm going to go and talk to the person about how we can work together to make exactly as that. To how do we make better connections that will help us both. In terms of students, I mean, clearly some of those are funded, including through Achieving and other scholarships that we offer. We have a Women in STEM scholarship now as well, which is from the British Council, and we're also financing people to come and study cybersecurity in Shrivenham. So quite a range now of people studying on the UK taxpayer, as it were. And so we clearly need to make good use of them both while they are in the UK, but in particular when they come back, because there is a huge range of expertise I've found when I've been hosting Chevening groups here. And I was talking to the president of the Chevening Society just last week about how we can work more closely together. And then I think others, in many cases we don't really know. And so I think one of the challenges for me is how I find out who's there. I was chatting to someone I met on Twitter the other day about exactly the sort of younger community in business or in universities and how I can connect with that. I've been invited to speak to the LSE Balkans Society next time I'm over in the UK, probably at the end of this month, probably with the Serbian Prime Minister for the EBRD summit. So I'm hoping to do that. But yeah, I mean, if people have suggestions of groups or avenues that will allow us to plug in to people we may not be connected with, then I'm all ears.
I will just connect with that. We got a comment from Lindsay. Our funded PhD student was declined from visa, and there is an issue, obviously.
Do you know, I think I'm amazed it's taken this long to get to visas, but thank you for sparing me until now. Yeah, I mean, I think visas are the perennial issue that comes up, and I think it is a challenge for some of the things that I would like to do. The visa system is a challenge to that. So it's a conversation we're having in government with the Home Office, who owns our visa system. But it is certainly at the top of the list of pretty much every meeting I have with not just members of the Serbian government, but civil society. And if you look at my Twitter feed, whenever I have some positive news, you will find that there's always a smattering of comments about visas there as well. So it's something that is very, very, very much at the top of my mind. It's not an easy one to fix, but it's something I'm kind of very aware of.
We are pleased that you are, because we have this campaign running, trying to abolish visas for Serbia, and we do understand political issues and all that, but that does stop lots of good things happening because of visa issues. And we got over 10,000 signatures, but then we got a reply automatically. It's out of fashion at the moment. Government is reviewing, so it doesn't seem that goes further. So
I mean, you all read the papers and know the current kind of political context. But it is something that the government looks at, and I'm keen that we kind of use those review points to have a proper look at the system.
Now, on the other side, you've been already popular about speaking Serbian language. So we heard that everybody know now that you do speak Serbian, because it's obviously a difficult language to learn. So how you found it learning it, and any tips for young people? Because we have Serbian people young people of Serbian origin which are struggling to learn, and they are funding the schools and trying to improve that. Any tips?
Well, I'm very sure it's easier for younger people than for people of my age. But no, I think it's a really wonderful language, and I've really enjoyed. I spoke a little from when I was in Bosnia, but I was never that good before, and I've worked hard on it, and I think it is something that you have to work hard at. Certainly for me, having studied Latin and ancient Greek at university, Romance languages come fairly easily, but this was an entirely new, linguistic base, and it took me a while, and I found myself banging my head against brick walls at various points in the learning journey. But I think if one sticks with it, it's a really rewarding language to learn, and there are just some fantastic, colourful expressions and things that I'm really enjoying picking up. I think the most useful thing, I think, I'm very lucky that my government pays for this. I had 6 months pretty much full-time language training before I started the job. I had a month living in Novi Sad with a family there, and didn't speak a word of English for a month. And that's, if you can do it, that's the way to do it. Having lessons in the morning and working as a volunteer in the Studentsky Kulturni Center na fakultetu in the afternoon, and then just kind of hanging out with people in pubs and bars afterwards was a really brilliant way to learn. So yeah, total immersion is my top tip. But so if you can send people to stay with cousins and uncles and aunts, whatever it might be, that's probably the most painful but most effective way of making leaps and strides.
Yeah, it seems that we are at the moment a generation which didn't speak English, like my parents. They are all gone now. So younger parents or grandparents are speaking quite a good English. So they usually try to practice their English.
Yeah. I hear that from a lot of people, that the younger generation is finding it challenging sometimes to pick up the language. So but no, I mean, as I say, I've really enjoyed it, and I feel very privileged that my government's invested in me and allowing me to learn the language, and I've certainly found, it's a really valuable tool. There aren't that many ambassadors here who do speak Serbian, and even if I don't run a whole meeting in Serbian, even just having a bit of a chat before or after it does wonders to break the ice. So yeah, it's great.
You can also, in restaurants, you can hear what other people are talking about if they don't know.
Yeah, well, that's true as well. Yeah.
Now, do you have a favorite restaurant already, or not yet? Or you're still exploring?
Favorite what? Sorry.
Do you have favorite restaurant or cafe that you might be building?
Do you know, I call me old fashioned. I love just going down to Skedalia and hanging out there. And we had a team Christmas dinner there in December, which was a very fun night with a lot of us and some great music and a lot of singing and even a little bit of dancing. But yeah, so that's Belgrade's just a great city to live in, and there's so much going on that I'm kind of spoiled for choice, really.
I agree. You are, because all what you like about Belgrade is that life, the social life, nightlife, and not just nightlife, but generally, because everything is small, it's much easier, much more approachable than in London.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very. I get some wonderful invitations. I was at the opera last night, and I'm going to a brass band concert with the Slovenian Armed Forces Day tomorrow. So I'm luckier than most. But yeah, I rarely have a night in. Let's put it like that.
That's pretty good to hear. If somebody has more questions to ask, I'm chatting now about the social life, but if you do have some more serious questions or not to ask, please do join our chat room still. And we are here to answer. You have 10 more minutes, let's say. We will have time to talk about it. And now tell me about your children. Have they managed to get into our society well, or do they find it challenging? Because we have these issues here again with Serbian children. Usually they're absolutely fine, but sometimes there are some maybe small issues. Are they settled nicely?
Yeah, I mean, we've done that sort of thing that most people in this region simply don't understand, which is sending two of our children, a long way away and across the sea. So the two of our kids are at school in England, but coming back regularly. But our youngest, Mimi, Nasha Malasarek, she's here with us, and is loving being back in Belgrade. And she, because she was born in Sarajevo, she feels this is her part of the world, and so she's very happy to be back in the region. And they're all. I've been told, I was told before I arrived, actually, I was told, just be careful when you come about tweeting about or putting out social media about Serbian food, because some people have been thought to have done that a little bit overkill. But we really enjoy it, and my kids love coming back and just popping out for Chavapi or whatever it might be, and going exploring. So yeah, and there's a lot to explore. We were at Golubac Fortress on Sunday, out on the Romanian border, wonderfully restored. So there's some really fantastic places to get out and about and see.
Okay. What I gathered from our previous communication, you are involved quite a lot in some charity work at charity foundations, and you are supporting that part of life. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? What
Yeah, I mean, the embassy has for many years supported lots of charities. So I haven't visited them all. In fact, tomorrow I think I'm going to make pancakes at the Svratište, a shelter for kids which I'm looking forward to. I've also been out selling the Serbian equivalent of the big issue, Lica Ulica, which I was spectacularly bad at, I have to say. I spelled two in an hour, but my son did rather better, luckily. And then my wife, Caroline, has just joined the board of Bell Hospice, which is a really fantastic organisation here, and I know she's looking forward to getting stuck in to that charity, both in terms of fundraising, but also working with the Serbian government, where I hope I can offer some support in terms of trying to regularise its status, because palliative care is not currently recognised as a core part of healthcare in Serbia. So, and that's tied to another British charity. And then the other one that I'm working with right now is Grub, which is a great name, but which is a charity for Roma children, British-based charity, where we're going to be hosting a fundraising event here at the residence in a few weeks' time. And that supports education, but also kind of musical skills amongst Roma children. So there's some really nice connections, including with British charities, some of them linked to the Prince's Trust, in the case of Grub, for example, in the case of Bell Hospice, to a British hospice charity. So those are lovely things, and I'm really keen to work on those, including with Princess Yelisaveta, in fact, who is connected to many of them as well.
We have one more question coming from Dragan. Is Mrs. Alicia Kearns, the elected chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, helping to break down the barriers we would like to break, or is she making things a bit more difficult between the two countries, and what can we do about it?
Well, I mean, Mrs. Kearns is a parliamentarian and is at absolute liberty to offer her thoughts, and as chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, she's in a particular position. She's not a member of the British government, so she can speak to her own views. But I mean, I think that the point I always sort of come back to is the one I made earlier, that it feels to me that we need to do much better to build that kind of parliamentary exchange and dialogue, and hopefully to build more mutual understanding in both directions. And so it was, I think someone put on the chat, it was very good that the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Serbia came and visited here last summer. I saw the speaker, I don't know if he's the outgoing speaker or not yet, we'll see, but a couple of weeks ago to stress the need, I think, to increase the pace and tempo of that parliamentary exchange. There are legitimate concerns in parliaments across Europe right now, including around how Serbia will respond to some of the concerns around the handling of the elections in December. The European Parliament will be debating that and voting on a resolution very shortly as well. So this is not just a UK issue. Serbia, I think, needs to reflect on some of those concerns in parliaments, and we've said, including through ministers, that we think Serbia needs to take very seriously the concerns that have been made about the elections and respond to the recommendations that will come in the report from the OSCE, and we're very happy to support the implementation of those recommendations. But fundamentally, yeah, I mean, I think we need to have a bigger conversation about both the present but also the future, and I hope that I will be able to encourage more people, not just parliamentarians, but across the board, to spend a bit more time thinking about Serbia.
Yeah, and we do, if I can just say, we do send them copies of Serbian Month catalogue, which tries to show the contribution that we make within the UK and, what we're doing during Serbian Month. But I know there's a question, Maya, that David and Vladislava have put forward.
Yes, David and Vladislava, formerly of Notre Dame University. The ambassador mentioned the toxic and macho culture in Serbia as a barrier to cultural meeting. Does the ambassador meet other and alternative members of the Serbian cultural community and creative people who express different views?
Yes, I do, and I'm sure there are still many more for me to meet. But I've been trying to reach out to lots of different cultural and civil society organisations some of whom are doing really fantastic work, sometimes in quite difficult circumstances, particularly on the civil society front. And some of those we're able to support directly through government program funding. Some of them we're just kind of interested to kind of see what they're up to and provide kind of moral support or show interest. I hosted, for example, a reception for the LGBT community in December, just for Christmas, to make the point that that we are very keen to keep those connections going outside Pride Month, which is when they're kind of front and centre, but they're really important. And when I go up to Novi Sad the week after next, I'll be visiting some of those guys as well. I'm also plugging into all sorts of different kind of cultural institutions, particularly with the British Council, and seeing how we can work to to show up some of the really positive and vibrant things that go on in Serbian society, and as you say, to provide a bit of a counterpoint to the narrative, which is sometimes the dominant one.
Thank you very much. We don't have any more questions. It's a last call for the questions because we are closing in a few minutes' time. But I would like to say after this meeting, I feel really positive. And
well,
thank you.
Bit and half accomplished.
Which is really needed from our diaspora. And obviously, your point of view are very much aligned with our point of view in many things, maybe not political ones, but we are not here to we are not politicians, obviously. But in that connection between diasporas and between, let's put it, ordinary people, which matters more to us here in Serbian diaspora, that will make the difference in viewing each country, Serbia in Britain and Britain in Serbia, and come back to our old good times as it used to be, First World War, Second World War. So I'm sure that we can come back to a really great relationship between the two countries. Olga, do you have something more to say?
I mean, I was just going to say thank you for your openness, your frankness with us, and sharing your ideas. I mean, I think there's a lot, as Maya has said, at the level at which we operate as the Serbian diaspora, that we can take into account. And there's a lot of, I see, similarities and connections that we can make. And, one of the things that has always constrained us is the lack of funding that we have for doing our work. And so there might be ways that we can collaborate with you that would enable us to do more and to help you achieve your objectives and our objectives here. So, I mean, we know how busy you are. We'd like to thank you for participating in this. We hope maybe it could become an annual event because I think, and as I say, we don't want this just to be a one-off. What we will be doing is taking the points that you've made and that have been raised by colleagues during this meeting, and we will discuss them at the roundtable meeting where Serbian organisations meet, and it will inform our strategy for the future. So I hope you feel that it's been worthwhile, and if there's anything you'd like to ask us before we close the meeting, please feel free to. Otherwise, just a great big thank you to you and for those who have joined the meeting.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Olga. Thanks, Maya, and thanks everyone who's given up some of their evening to come and to listen in and ask questions. And I really do hope it is the beginning rather than the end of the conversation. I'm certainly here for these next 4 years, and as I say, I think resources are a challenge for all of us. But in that context, I'm really keen that we use absolutely everything that we have in the armory to that yes. And try and put it all into the same, so we're all heading in the same direction. And so, this kind of community I see is absolutely one that I'm keen to spend more time with, to kind of share what I'm trying to achieve, what we're trying to achieve, and to see how we can kind of help each other. So please do stay in touch and please do share your ideas. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thank you, everybody.